All right, I know it's been a long while since I've done an actual playthrough video on my channel. You can chalk it up to being really busy this year with a number of things in my personal life, including trying to get my own game design finished when we're in the final steps of that. But just got back from SD and I ended up sitting next to Steve Carey at the con, and he was testing his Shiloh Blind Swords games. And I thought to myself, I've been wanting to play Blind Swords for months now. The Civil War stuff specifically, because I have played at Any Cost Mets. And every time I walked by the tables, I saw the maps, I saw the counters, I saw people having fun with the system, saw the Revolution guys playing. And I just decided basically, when I get home, I'm going to dive into what I own. So if you've been following my channel for a while, you may remember that I picked up Stonewall Sword back in February at Game On Con for $5 that someone was selling. So I pulled it out, I set it up, and I just figured, hey, let's just do a solo game of Stonewall Sword, the first one in the series from Revolution, and get a hang of the rules and see how it plays. You know, these games are known for being very soloable, given the chit draw aspects to the game. So here we are. We're going to do the entire 14-turn game of Stonewall Sword. So, this is the Battle of Cedar Mountain, obviously. And, I'm not much, as I always tell you, I'm not much of a Civil War history person. I really love some of the Civil War games that are out there, but I don't really know the exhaustive history or the history of the battles. So this will be as much of a learning experience as it will a fun gameplay experience for me. And, of course, people will point out when I do something stupid or ahistorical, I am sure. So what I know of this battle is that an outnumbered Union division decided that they were going to, on a hot day, they were going to charge a Confederate position, a disorganized Confederate position, where Stonewall Jackson, had been kind of dithering for a bit. And so this is the way the game is going to open. We've got the Union lines advancing, I guess, in this direction. We've got the artillery, all of the Union artillery here. The way I presume the game is going to shake out is that we're going to want to get the artillery in a position to drop fire down on some of the Confederate positions. So I'm going to have to figure out how to do that. This map, by the way, is Rick Barber map, hand-drawn. It's really pretty. And so what I'm looking at here are some of the elevation changes. So as we get towards orange, we're getting higher. So we've got this sort of like high ground here, and then we've got here's actually Cedar Mountain over here. So we've got high ground in this part of the map, high ground in this part of the map, and then we've got this low-lying sort of valley here, and I believe this is a cornfield here in the middle. So we're gonna have to figure out the right approach for the Union. So all of these forces over here for the Confederates are gonna have to, they don't get to do anything unless the Union enters this hex row here where the yellow cube is. So primarily we're going to be playing on this part of the map for the first several turns of the game. So I've got to figure out how to get the Union in position to take advantage of the fact that they have lots of artillery. And then the other thing we're trying to do is get victory points. So anywhere you see one of these red stars, this is going to be victory points for the Confederate player, I believe, if they can take it. Well, some of it's showing up red, but these are blue, these are red. So the Union wants to take these positions here. The Confederacy wants to take these positions here. I can already see with the blue and red stars here that we're going to have some fighting in this sort of higher elevation field. So we're going to definitely want to get some of our units down through here. I think the easiest way to do that is come down this road and sort of climb the hill right there. And then we've got these wide open sight lines as soon as we leave the Confederate positions out in front. So I'm not entirely certain what I'm going to do. We do have some skirmish units here. But I'm basically looking for where artillery is going to be most useful. And then obviously there's big Confederate points here. That's a 10-point hex if they capture that. That's a 10-point hex if they capture that. So the Union's going to have to try not to exhaust all of their manpower early and make sure that they save some of the fight, because Confederate reinforcements are going to pour on over the course of the first half of the game. And the Union will find itself outnumbered. So I need to have a good defensive strategy as well, but I can't just sit there because I do need to take some ground. I do need to take some of these victory point locations down here. There's one here. So it's an interesting offensive defensive puzzle. Not sure what I'm going to do, but let's, I guess, get playing. This is my first time playing the game, though not the system, and so I will stumble through it a bit. And I'll probably check in after every cup is empty, or possibly at pivotal moments. Okay, I think I played the first turn correctly. it's been a while since I played this system, but it all started to come back to me as I started to do it. So we had the Confederates here just kind of shuffling positions. We got Taliaferro's brigade off of this road, so in the upcoming artillery phase, we can get this Confederate artillery into a more useful spot. Garnet was unfortunately was not able to activate. A couple of the Union brigades were not able to activate either, although through our CIC chit and through one of our marching chits, we were able to fix that. And then, yeah, so the Union just came down. We've got several brigades. So we've got Crawford's brigade coming down this road. They're going to kind of lead this initial charge, or at least lead this initial approach here. The Union artillery has moved into this cornfield. We're going to definitely try to put some fire on this artillery unit here. The rest of the artillery, I don't think they can see anybody. This one might be able to see this guy. Might be extended range, shooting over a friendly unit. Well, actually, I think he might be higher. Let's see. The elevation here is 5. The elevation here, it looks to be higher than 5. So we're firing uphill. So actually, I don't think this unit matters because he's below the level of firing. So, we might try and put some fire here. But in general, what I'm trying to do with the Union is I'm trying to get this brigade here, sort of the core center. We want to do as much damage as we can, and then these follow-up brigades, we're going to be adaptable with. If we take a lot of hits and these guys need to fall back, we're going to move up some units. I also want to be conscious of the fact that there are huge Confederate victory points over here, and these units will eventually be able to be set free, and there are no Union reinforcements. So we're going to have to get into a position that defends some of these approaches, likely with Prince's brigade. Leary's brigade is kind of being held in reserve, and then Gordon's brigade here, we're trying to get them up onto this hill and swing around to contest these victory points here. So that's the plan. We'll see how it goes. All right, end of turn 2, 40 minutes into the battle. Not much movement happening here, mostly because the Confederates were able to use their event chits to great effect, mucking up the movement of some of the Union brigades. Were able to get an uncontrolled advance off of the Fortunes of War chit that put a shaken marker on this unit here. Also, flipping this unit in Geary's brigade to battle worn. And then the Union failed a bunch of command activations. So really the best thing that they were able to do is get Gordon from up on this hill into these woods, and they're going to sweep around here and try and come at some of these. The Confederates responding here with some of Garnett's brigade as well. But the most consequential thing that happened here was this track here. So part of the mechanic of the game is that when the Confederates draw an event chit, they can choose not to execute that chit and instead put it here as a Find General Jackson chit. At the end of the turn, you roll 2d6, subtracting 1 for every of these markers you've committed for the turn. And if you roll equal to or less than the turn value, or the turn number, then you move this Jackson marker up. And when it gets here, Jackson gets added to the game, and he's ready to go, which the Confederates need pretty badly. Well, this turn, the Confederates rolled, and they actually paid off. They got a result of 1 that was less than 2. And, so Jackson goes from Jackson inactive to Jackson aware. So 2 more times for that, and the fortunes for the Confederacy are probably going to get pretty good. All right, well, we've had some fire now, finally, some legitimate combats happening, but we do have our first close combat that's going to happen here. So Prince's brigade managed to steal a quick march against the Confederates through these cornfields, and they did take one loss there under the 111th Pennsylvania, but the 102nd New York is going to move up here and is going to try and close combat this artillery, which is shaken and battle worn here, the Louisiana Guard and the Maryland. So this is going to be a pretty interesting one. So to make sure I do this properly, I'm just going to kind of walk through it so you can see what happens. So the first thing that happens is when we declare close combat, the defending units get to fire, and this is going to be canister range with these artillery. So that's going to be 2 minus 1 is 1, and another 1 on top. That's 2. Then because they're at canister range, they do get plus 50%. So it's 3. So we're going to roll on the 3 column to see if we do any sort of hits. Ooh, that's a pretty good roll. So 56 on the 3 column is going to necessitate a morale check for any unit with 1 through 4, which this Union unit here, the 102nd New York, does have. So then we look at the morale, the cohesion test tables, and we see what happens, and we get what is it? What did I say it was? Green. So it's a routine morale test. We got 3 and 3. 3 and 3 is going to force a retreat R1. So this fire, as the New York riflemen tried to advance on this artillery position, push them back, and that would end the close combat. There is no further things to do. The artillery defended itself. So the Union getting close here. They've suffered very few losses. The artillery advantage definitely in the Union's favor, although the Confederates so far did break the 28th New York from a really serious barrage from Carpenter and his stack of artillery on the advance. So we're almost done with turn 3, and I will check back in soon. All right, well, the Union artillery is really shellacking the Confederate positions. You can see all across the line, we've got Confederate artillery under shaken, or in this case, disrupted markers. And that's just because the Union artillery is getting really great rolls on a lot of their shots. Now, it doesn't help that the Confederate artillery have to position themselves in places where, they're pretty vulnerable on ridges and stuff like that. But this cavalry unit did obviously its close combat. It was driven off by a shot here, but this artillery unit is as weak as it could possibly be. It benefited from attacking this Pennsylvania cavalry here. So the Confederacy is in kind of a tough spot coming into future artillery turns. A lot of this artillery, and this is my sort of inexperience with the game, but we've got artillery units not next to infantry brigades, and so therefore they're not going to be able to rally on this turn effectively, which is maybe my fault, my bad. But on the bright side, we do have Ronald's Virginia Brigade coming in up the road, and I'm thinking I might take them. They have a couple ways they can go. They can come up this road and kind of plug here against Crawford, or they can come this way. But I think this side is pretty covered by Early. Well, I'm going to reposition Early's units to get these artillery units into a spot where they can rally next turn. And I think I'm going to bring Ronald up here, and we're going to try and blunt the charge of Crawford here in the center. It's going to be tough because the Union now has artillery on these heights in the wheat field, and Garnett's going to be facing Gordon here pretty quickly. So kind of a fluid situation. Well, the Union's really starting to feel the pain. Crawford's brigade had 2 units break. Prince as well had a unit break. A lot of really strong fire coming down from some key points from the Confederate defense. Thankfully, they were all in the broken 1 box. The Union did get their licks in there on one of the 21st Virginia Regiment in Garnett's brigade. So they're all ready to be rebuilt. And I think Crawford's brigade really needs to think about doing that. We were trying to move in here to Newman's Cabin and the Crittenden Gate to try and snag these victory point hexes, and there were some lucky chit draws from Taliaferro for Taliaferro's brigade, specifically some of their units to move in. We had a rebel yell, and we had some firefights here, and we managed to push those regiments and break them off. And I'm just trying to get some points. We're going into turn 5. The Union still doesn't have any points. So it's a little concerning. Union did bring down Geary's brigade from all the way up here down this road. They're going to come in and take the place while we pull Crawford's brigade back and try to reform them. It's going to take a couple of turns because they're too close here. Well, these units are too close to try and rebuild and flip back over. Early's brigade has been really resolute here, specifically the 12th Georgia here in the Cedars victory point hex. They've been just firing down on all of these units from Prince's brigade who've been trying to take the hill, managed to drive them off. So it's been pretty tough going for the Union. About the only spot on the map that they've made some progress here is with Gordon's brigade. Gordon's brigade managed to move up. The 27th Indiana did a close combat here. This is the unit that broke for the Confederates and then forced the 1st Virginia to retreat. So it'll be interesting artillery phase. We got some pretty good quality Confederate artillery here who can now see all these targets. These are some really big units. You can see 12s, you can see 10s. We're trying to take this hex, and I think one of these is another one. Yeah, we're trying to take these 2 hexes here, and so it's going to be really important that Gordon's brigade manages to achieve that this turn. Unfortunately, their commander was wounded early in the game, and so their activations are pretty low. Every time I pull out the Banks divisional chit, I'm using it on Gordon because I think it's really critical that they achieve this, given that there's the least amount of Confederate resistance here, to give them essentially a second activation every turn. I really like the system. It just, there's the chip pull adds a layer of uncertainty of stuff you don't think is going to happen. I was worried about Ronald's brigade coming up this road, and unfortunately, the activation order, the activation roll to get them moving failed, so they have not entered the game yet. And then this turn, we've got Thomas's brigade coming in. These are pretty really good units as well. So like time is slipping away from the Union at this point with this charge because they're not scoring any points right now. And so I'm a little concerned with their ability to like take some of this ground. So we'll see what can happen here. Starting to really see a lot of the chaos and the friction of battle now, as evidenced by the amount of shaken and disrupted markers on the map. The Union advance was repulsed in most sectors this turn. There was a unit in Geary's brigade that did manage to take over the Crittenden Gate hex, but Ronald's brigade came up this road and performed a counterattack and actually broke that unit. So it's been really hard for the Union to get a foothold anywhere in this section of the map. And with Thomas's brigade coming on this turn in this direction, now the Union's got to be very worried about how fast those units can get up to some of these juicy victory point spots. And on top of that, Prince's brigade and this cavalry unit have not succeeded very well in recovering their status on that last turn. You can see they pulled back into the cornfield. Really, the only Union success on this turn was with Gordon's brigade, who crossed this wheat field and managed to put the hurt on Garnett's brigade. I'm using these cubes to show that victory points were scored, as a reminder who controls them. But Garnett's brigade was pretty much shattered. A couple of units going to the broken box, the 42nd Virginia and the 48th Virginia. We eliminated one of the artillery units that were kind of up here on this ridge. 27th Indiana doing great work. Just a massive unit, right? 12 strength points. That's 50 men per strength point, so 600 men, something like that. And, you know, the 1st Virginia, not in too good a shape. There's probably not going to be too much recovery available to that unit. Some of Gordon's units, the smaller ones, took some hits, but there was a close assault here by the 42nd Virginia, and that resulted in both sides getting battle worn, and unfortunately the 42nd Virginia failed their break test. So Gordon's brigade in control on this flank of the map. The Union's really got to get it together for the rest because they're going to be coming under harsh Confederate advance pretty soon, I would guess. Ronald's brigade here now has kind of free reign to either drive up this road or to drive left to the, I guess this would be the north in this direction, and try and take back some of these key positions without leaving a gap sort of in the formational line. So I think as the Union, I may have been a little hasty in my attacks. I maybe should have set it up and waited a few more turns. I mean, we're just entering turn 6, and I believe that the second scenario in this game sets up on turn 7 with the beginning of the Union charge. So maybe I was a little too impatient. Should have let my artillery soften up the targets a little more. But this is a learning game. I'm just trying to get a sense of like how deadly close combat can be, how effective fire is, and some of the things that you would want to learn through experience to play the game better. So here we go. We're going into turn 6, the 5:20 p.m. turn, and then we're going to get a whole host of Confederate reinforcements on the following turns after that. So the Union really got to think about where they're going to set up their defensive plan, how they're going to prevent the Confederacy from reaching some of these juicy targets. And, of course, we're still going to be checking for Jackson and Ricketts as well. Beginning turn 7, almost halfway through the game, the Confederates have begun their sort of push forward. You can see Early's brigade here driving back the Union forces across the valley. That's going to be problematic. Prince up here is in various state of disrepair. And then the other significant thing that happened this turn is both CIC chits managed to move up on the track. Jackson is 1 box away from deploying. That's going to be huge for the Confederates, and Ricketts has moved up to Ricketts underway, so 2 more boxes there. It's about that time of the game where both sides are more likely than not to move up at the end of every turn. We did have a bunch of Confederate casualties this turn, especially, not a bunch, but a few. But Taliaferro, 47th Alabama, that's this brigade here, went back and forth with parts of Geary's brigade, took some artillery fire, so a little bit broken up in that particular spot, but we do have more Confederate reinforcements coming on this turn, so should prove to be fairly eventful, assuming the chits and command rolls don't go badly for the rebels. The other thing I wanted to point out real quick is just the unfortunate effects of the fog of war chit. We've got both Union divisional commanders wounded or replaced, which means that both Williams and Augur are only succeeding on a 2. That's going to severely limit what the Union's able to do, and that may prove to be too much to overcome given the way the battle is unfolding. Wrapping up turn 9 here in Stonewall's sword, and it's kind of developed into an interesting set-piece battle here, where the Union kind of stalled out on their charge, have taken up a line across this cornfield, and have sort of anchored a bit of their objectives here on their right flank against a really battered and beaten brigade, Garnett's brigade. A couple of very aggressive advances by the Confederacy this turn. We did have Branch move up and then do some fire here, didn't to no effect. We did have one unit use Rebel Yell to try and knock out this unit from Geary's, the 7th Ohio, but he took some very withering fire and was forced back without any losses. So that was repulsed. The Union, even though their units have been more degraded, have repulsed most of the Confederate advances. We had a combat down here with this C unit, which is less than 1, managed to drive off and shake this Confederate unit who is adjacent to it. And then we actually broke from Gordon's, the African Zouave unit from Gordon's brigade, managed to break another of Garnett's recently reconstituted units. That was the 42nd Virginia. So hanging in there, the Union. And then after that all happened, we had the Confederacy fan out here. Now that A.P. Hill has arrived with his units, his army, his division, they have strung out this way, and he also ordered Thomas to move forward to try and outflank the Union position in the cornfields and really just try and destabilize their line that they've set up. And then in advance, sort of after that happened, we pushed forward with Early's brigade, and we made several close assaults across the line of artillery that the Union has set up here, trying to just shake that artillery loose to open the ground for sort of more echelons to advance in here and break the position. Unfortunately, only the 15th, only the 13th Virginia managed to do any sort of get any sort of result. The rest of it was point blank artillery fire that forced Early's brigade back, including severely disrupting the 58th Virginia. So really no successes on what should have been a pretty fearsome charge by the rebels. Now, some people have been commenting on some of the posts I made about this game on social media that like, oh, this is really cool. I've always wanted to play this game. And so I thought I'd run through a quick combat here real quick right at the end of the turn. So we did have a Union firefight chit left over for the turn that I want to now use to try and take advantage of the fact that we've got some Confederate units in sort of poor position. Mostly this one here. It's going to be tough to break him, but we'll see what we can do. So firefight allows all of the infantry in one stack, which I believe is just this unit here, the 5th Connecticut in this cornfield, to do some range combat. So we've got a 4 firepower, and we're going up against Early, who's a pretty high cohesion unit with a 5 there. So what you do when you're playing this game is you look at the column of strength points. So I'll be rolling on the 5 column over here, and then I'm going to roll 2d6, and it's a base 6 10s 1 system. So the red die will be 10s, the white die will be 1s, and then based on what I roll, we may do some column shifts, and then based on what I roll, I'll get a result. And one of these results, if the result is showing on the table, in this case I need to be 5 or higher, then I'll look at that color on the cohesion. That will force a cohesion test if there's a 5 on the combat result, and then I'll look at the cohesion test color that I got, and I'll roll 2d6 again to see whether or not the unit is battle-worn, so they lose a step, and then whether they have to retreat, become disorganized, possibly panic, and so forth. So you've got the fire combat here, you've got the close combat here, and basically every combat test in the game is going to be that. So let's roll it up here real quick while I'm filming this. So we are on the 4 column. I don't believe any of this is true. No one's in any terrain. I am not. There's none of this is true. So yeah, so I'm just on the 4 column, and it's going to be. Let's see. We'll roll. Okay, so I got 31. So if we look at the 4 column and we look at the range of 31 here, you can see that if the unit had a morale of 0 and 1, we would force a green morale test. Well, in this case, they have a morale of 5, morale, I keep saying morale, cohesion. They have a cohesion of 5, so we don't have to make a test for them, and they're able to stand there. Now, because I played a firefight chit, and I did not displace this unit, this was the risk of doing this, that unit actually gets to fire back, and that's the only time that you get any response fire in this system, is when a firefight chit is played and nothing happens. So we're gonna have him shoot. So he's a 6, but he's going to be firing into a cornfield. So that is going to, if you look here, target in cornfield, 1 left. So we're going to be on the 5 column, and let's see what we get. We got a 15. So that's probably not going to do anything. You can see here, nothing. So fire, ineffective, back and forth. And the other thing I should mention too, his cohesion is actually not a 5. It's a 4. He's considered right now unsupported, which is why this failure of this assault on this artillery was kind of not good. Because you are supported as infantry if you are next to a non-disrupted, non-shaken unit of your brigade. And in this case, you can see that the 13th Virginia doesn't have anyone of Early's brigade next to them. So what that does is lowers your cohesion by 1. So he's actually a 4. But in either case, the result I got on the firefight was nothing. So exchanging some fire back and forth, hitting a lot of corn, not doing too much of anything in effect. And that is the end of turn 9. We're headed to turn 10. And there's 5 turns left in the game. And the Union's about to score 2 more points. They are up to 18 points. So the Confederates really have to go about grabbing some of these big victory point hexes in order to win this game. I think they can do it. I mean, they've got superior numbers coming up this road, and there's really only one Union brigade here between this one, and they can probably swing around to get that one. So we'll see how it plays out. Coming into turn 10, 6:40 p.m. It's going to be 3 hours of battle. You can see here that the Confederate push is on. A lot of Hill's divisions have come up, or brigades have come up this road through here and are attempting to outflank the Union position and get access to Robert Hudson's and Hudson's Mill, which is up here. These are each worth 10 points. They basically just need to score that twice and they can probably win. I don't think... so the Union have lost control of these heights. The Confederates, specifically Ronald's brigade, has really done a number on Gordon, and there's just no way to hold that, I don't think. And meanwhile, we've got 3 fresh brigades, coming up here, basically unopposed. The Union really struggling. They're trying to turn. You can see, Prince has kind of like turned the flank to try and like prevent sort of like an encirclement. And then now that Ricketts is in the game, we do have some Union reinforcements coming on, but they're going to have to beat feet to get over here. I'm thinking that when it's the Union's turn, we're going to use the Banks chit to activate them so they can hopefully get 2 activations and come down this road and stand against the Confederates here. It's really going to depend on what order the chits come out here. But the Confederates, they've made some assaults. They've kind of pushed the Union line back. I think this turn they're going to go all out, go for broke. They do need to running out of time to score some points. So it's going to be really tense in the final 4 or 5 turns. Well, the number of shaken and disrupted markers on the map should tell you how fiercely the combat became this turn. Really sort of the most major engaging that we've had of the entire game so far. Turn 10. The Confederates definitely made their move. You can see that miraculously they made their move and did pretty well, and miraculously did not score any points. They were in a position to, and they just did not. And I'll explain how that happened. But basically you had Hill's division coming in this direction. You can see that Archer has moved up here, that Thomas has moved up here. Thomas actually put the hurt on Prince and started to loosen the cornfield up a little bit, although he did lose... No, he didn't lose anybody, but he was repulsed. This unit took some fire, but Thomas sort of started to loosen this up. Really, it was Pender's brigade that made the biggest impact. They came around here and they managed to take Robert Hudson's house. I think it was the 34th North Carolina came in here, and they drove off sort of the Union forces. You can see the retreat in this direction. But then through some very fortunate shit play, Towers' brigade came in and mounted a furious counterattack. They stormed the house and managed to take it back, pushed Pender's brigade, caused some losses, some disruptions, and and managed to prevent the Confederacy from scoring 10 points that turn. They managed to hold that, and they're actually in pretty good shape. I mean, only the 26th New York has taken any damage, but they're in really good shape to try and maybe finish off Pender to alleviate that threat. Unfortunately, we did not get a activation with Trimble. Their commander has been wounded, so the green units have not been getting very good activation rolls, and they wanted to make a run for Hudson's Mill, but they couldn't. We'll see. They've still got 4 more turns to try it. And then down here, the Union decided that, with all else being equal, they don't want to be surrounded and crushed. They decided to mount a counterattack, and it was Crawford's brigade that charged across this cornfield and attacked Early, and actually did an okay job of driving back some of Early's units. You can see here, and you can see here. So Early, a bunch of units in Shaken did not expect that, but it cost Crawford's brigade pretty dearly to do that. A lot of this artillery is undefended at this point, and you can see Tolver, now I'm saying it correctly, Tolver coming off the hill, moving in against that artillery. If they can survive this sort of salvo in the artillery phase, they should be able to wipe some of that stuff out. The Union did lose a couple more artillery pieces this turn to close combats, including on the hill here. Branch's brigade emerged from this hilltop. They did actually have a unit take this crossroads, but at the very end, Geary's brigade got an unlikely activation and were able to counterattack the lone regiment that was holding that crossroads, and that would have been another 5 points. So the Confederacy had, about halfway through the turn, 15 points on the hoof, and they just were not able to hold it. And then while all this is going on, Gordon was able to reconstitute the 27th Indiana, at least a little bit. I need to put a marker under there to show he can't be flipped over. And so, yeah, it's very, very contentious right now. We'll see if the Confederacy can push the advantage. The one thing that the Confederates do have going in their favor is that they do have another set of reinforcements coming on. Not huge units, but more manpower is always better. The Union, they deferred last turn's reinforcements. This is, if I can get it to focus, come on, Hartsuff. This is Hartsuff's brigade. They deferred it last turn so that he didn't enter up here, and now he's going to enter along this road, which is going to really seal off the victory points here when they join up with Tower's brigade. Pender's got to be real careful he doesn't get surrounded. That's a very real possibility. And all in all, I think the Union is, despite taking a brunt of losses, they're doing quite good in terms of holding the line against some very zealous Confederate attacks. All right, 7 p.m. turn. We've got 1 hour, basically. Well, I've got an hour and 20 minutes left of gameplay, and we'll see where we stand at the end. Really good turn for the Rebels on this one. We finally were able to get Trimble's brigade to do something. We actually used our divisional command shit to activate them twice this turn, and it was very, very effective. They overwhelmed the cavalry here and Green's brigade, eliminating one of those units and driving the others way back past Hudson's Mill. They managed to capture Hudson's Mill, which is 5 victory points for them. A huge turn. And the other great part about this is that Trimble's brigade was able to take a position along this river along this river right here that's actually still got water in it. So what's interesting about this scenario is that you can see a lot of the river and stream hexes have it through the middle of the hex. What that's indicating is that there's no terrain effect because it's dry. There's no water in there. Right up until you get to here, and then it becomes a hex side. This is actually impassable right here, this pond, and then these 2 hex sides are actually river hex sides that would incur penalties across. And so Trimble was able to get into a great position here to hold Hudson's Mill from the Union and really not have to worry about these severely depleted units. Incidentally, I am using yellow cubes now because I've run out of Shaken markers because of the number of Shaken and disrupted units on the map. So despite the fact that the Union, Ricketts' army arrived and Tower and Hartsuff did a great job pushing the Confederate right back, they were not fast enough to stop Trimble from being able to get up there and seize the mill. Huge for the Confederacy. We've still got Forno's brigade over here, just unable to get in their command moving. The leader has been wounded from this particular division, and I elected to have Trimble go when I got a good roll instead of Forno. So I've been sitting up here kind of watching the battle the whole time. Along the rest of the way, it was pretty static in the middle, the Union and Confederates kind of facing off against one another. There was some fire back and forth, not a whole lot happening, but Field's division, under the command of Hill, did make a charge and push, and with the help of a fog of war shit that allowed them to displace the 5th Ohio from this crossroads and disrupt them, Field's brigade was able to capture this crossroads. So all in all, this turn, they cut the Union lead in half by scoring 10 points. And if they can do that, they can hold it through the next turn. They're going to go up. They're going to send the Union into negative victory points, basically, which would be very bad. You can see here that Duria's brigade from New York has come down the road to try and just hold any further expansion by Confederate forces. And we've got some of these artillery units here that are a little bit stranded now, sort of in, with this Confederate mass pushing forward towards the cornfield. They have to be really careful. I may decide to move them on this upcoming artillery phase, just because this is an objective as well, and I don't want them to be overrun. What's really kept the Union in the game so far has been their artillery, the quality of their artillery and the number of their artillery. And so, while I could take the opportunity to fire and potentially cause some damage at canister range, I do think it's probably more important to not give the Confederates a foothold here, to overrun these guys and potentially score 5 more points before the game is over. And then down here on this hill, I guess mountain hill, whatever you'd want to call it, we did finally get an activation with Ronald. And Ronald was able to make an assault on Gordon's Zouaves, push them back across the brushy field here. You can see, I believe now, see, here's another 5-point hex, and Gordon is really beat up. That's going to free up Garnett to be able to do something. They've just been kind of holding flat, waiting for Ronald to make their move. So, this division over here, if they can get the activations, can potentially sweep the Union right basically off the mountain, and then it would be very hard for the Union to win, I think. So the Union's got to get kind of lucky with the 3 turns we have left to hold and maybe take back one of these hexes that have been captured by the Confederacy. This one's probably the most likely, but they're also going to need to capture something else, and I don't know how they're going to do that because many of the Union victory point hexes are behind enemy lines in a pretty real way. Going into the 7:40 p.m. turn, and the Union have done sort of the impossible, and that is basically utterly incapacitate and kneecap Trimble's brigade. 2 of the units broke under some just heavy assault by Hartsuff. Hartsuff did manage to recapture the mill and protect Greene and Bayard here from further destruction, leaving this Confederate Latimer's artillery in an extremely vulnerable position, and basically the entire Confederate right flank in a very defensive posture. We used Banks's divisional chit to activate Hartsuff, and then Hartsuff got a further activation later in the turn. So they were able to cross that stream around the pond near Hudson's Mill and just annihilate. They got really good rolls against Trimble's brigade. Just annihilated the units. So that's going to be problematic for the Confederacy for a number of reasons. It did prevent them from scoring the 5 points here, or will prevent them. So this is where I need to correct myself a little bit in the way that I was thinking about scoring. The Confederates don't score every turn like the Union does. The Confederates score at the end of the game for what they hold. So it may have been an overextension to try and take Hudson's Mill, although it was hard to see that coming because Trimble's brigade was in really good shape getting up there, and they thought they could hold it against that pond. Unfortunately not. That does mean that the score, I have fixed the score. We're back to 18 points for the Union. They've accumulated that over the course of the game, and it's going to stay that way until we do final scoring at the end. Here you can see a bunch of the broken casualties on the broken track. A lot of stuff that needs to be repaired, and that's because at the end of the game, points are going to be awarded for what's based on the broken track. So I think in these final 2 turns, we're going to see a lot of units trying to recover and rebuild. But like I said, the Confederacy will score at the end of the game, not per turn. So I did correct that. The Confederacy does have control of this crossroads here. That's 5. They have control of this crossroads here. That's 10. They do probably need to get one more objective, and you can see that Early is driving in here, protected only by artillery. Confederate artillery's got to figure out what they're going to do during this artillery phase. Ronald's brigade wiped out Gordon as well. The flanks is where all the action was happening, and so the Confederate line has kind of shifted here towards the Union right, but the Union right is pretty strong. Doria and Carroll showed up from Ricketts' division, and so it's going to be real tough, I think, maybe for the Confederates to hold this position. We'll see how it turns out. I just want to set the record straight on that. We're going to go into the 7:40 p.m. turn. We're almost done, and then we'll do the final victory scoring. All right, we have concluded Stonewall's Sword. This is my first playthrough of a American Civil War blind swords game. And I love it. I love this system. It is so great, and it's a really fun game to play solo. Just because of the chit draw and everything. Here's the final look of the battlefield. The Confederates put on a push very late. They carved their way through the cornfield here. Archer's brigade coming so close to capturing that hex that the 5th Connecticut is on. Unfortunately, they just ran out of steam. The last turn was actually really interesting. The Confederates, for most of the game, had been getting very advantageous chit draw orders in which they were acting usually near the ends of turns and being able to kind of have the tempo. But on the final turn of the game, almost all of the Confederate chits came out first, which allowed the Union to really respond and secure some of the objectives that they needed to do. The yellow cubes again are the shaken, disrupted markers. I don't have enough for this game for all of the units that are that had that status at the end. There was a lot of heavy combat in the cornfield. The ultimate fate of Hudson's Mill is that the Confederates were pushed back. Hartsuff's brigade, while taking heavy losses, managed to repulse Forno, who in the final 2 turns was finally able to get some activations and come down off this hill to try and take the mill. Unfortunately, they just couldn't find the way to do that. Hartsuff's brigade, probably the most effective Union brigade of the entire game. A lot of the final turn involved a lot of these brigades just exchanging fire and trying to retreat and reform, get rid of their shaken, disrupted markers. Ricketts rolled very poorly on some of his activations, so never got Carroll into the fight. Which wasn't ultimately ended up needed. Branch did manage to take back the crossroads and really put the hurt on Doria. But they weren't able to advance much further than that, and there was not a lot of activity down here. There were basically 2 deciding factors, and I'll tell you the final outcome of the game, but 2 deciding factors that really sort of dictated what happened here. One, Union artillery positioning. I did not know it as I was doing it, but sticking the artillery in these cornfields was very effective. Getting fire on sort of this sloping terrain prevented the Confederates from really massing and being able to charge and run them off. And so they allowed the Union to basically hold the cornfield for the entire game. Union artillery positioning in general was a lot better than Confederate artillery positioning, but the Union artillery units were also better than the Confederate artillery units, and that really provided a strong bulwark against the Confederate counterattack. If we want to look at the casualties here, you can see that we eliminated 4 Union artillery units compared to only 1 from the Confederates, but still, the Union artillery, very numerous, very powerful. The other sort of determining factor here in the game was the number of wounds that commanders took in this game. Here's the final outlay of which brigade commanders were in the cup at the end of the game. You can see that both Ewell and Winder were both wounded, as were Ricketts and Augur. Ricketts wasn't wounded until the final turn. Augur was basically wounded the whole game. So was Ewell. But the command ratings on the Union wounded generals were a lot better than the Confederate wounded generals. Basically, Winder didn't get a chance to activate most of his brigades, the blue ones, for most of the game because he took that wound pretty early in the battle. And that is why Garnett and Ronald and Tolver are essentially in the same starting positions from like turn, the beginning of the game or like turn 2 or 3. They just were not able to get going because he took a wound early. And Ewell was much the same. These were the green brigades for the Confederates. Early is in here. He was not able to do very much very often. And like we saw, Forno was caught on this hill for, almost the entire game, basically 3 or 4 hours. So the Confederates, while they were more numerous, they weren't able to bring their command to bear against the Union until way later. And then obviously because we were playing with sort of the Ricketts and Jackson reinforcement tracks, which is an optional rule, but I felt I wanted to make it a little bit more of an even fight. Once Ricketts entered the game, that allowed the Union to really secure their gains on the battlefield. And without Hartsuff, without Tower, without Doria, I think the Confederates would have won an easy, handy victory. So, what is all said and done when the dust has settled? Well, you subtract one side's victory points from the other, and what did we get on this one? We got 0. We got 0 victory points. That is a complete draw, and I would say that that is how the game felt at the end. The Union definitely held the Confederate counterattack, and they were able to score enough points during the game at some of these locations up here to give themselves enough of an advantage when it came time to calculate casualties that led to a draw battle. So the Confederates underperforming a little bit compared to history. The one thing here is there were more Confederate unit casualties on the broken track, but the ones that the Union had were really big regiments. And that ultimately, if the Union could have maybe husbanded their regiments a little more and, prevented casualties to their really big regiments, they actually might have won the game. But as it is, it came to a draw, which is very fitting for me playing against myself. What did we all do it for? Well, we did it because it was enjoyable. It was really fun. I really love Blind Swords. Both of the games now that I've played have been really great experiences. This is probably, it's so funny. I'm not a Civil War person at all. Like, the history is what it is, but it doesn't really interest me that much. But by and large, the best operational and one of the best tactical systems that I've played are both American Civil War games. And I just find that very interesting. I'm really excited. I know Revolution's working on a Blind Swords games for the Napoleonic era. I'm going to be all about those. I really can't wait. I think Blind Swords could actually be transferred to a lot of different eras really well. So that's the conclusion here of Stonewall Sword. If you haven't checked out Blind Swords, this is a really good game to start with. It's a half-size map. One counter sheet basically of units. You can play with the optional rules that adds more, or you cannot. And it's a great intro to the system. It's very affordable. It's beautiful, nicely produced, and I think pretty replayable given just the way that the variation of the chit draws and the command rolls can ultimately lead to different situations and narrative moments. So double thumbs up for me. We will be playing more Blind Swords in the future, and I'm looking forward to doing that. So thanks for watching this. My next Blind Swords game that I'm playing Opposed is probably going to be Most Fearful Sacrifice. That will be in February, and I will be sure to document that as part of my Game On 2024 coverage. So look forward to that.